Welcome, everyone.
What?
Thank you for joining us today on this webinar, which is the first of this series, Microsoft Syntex in Action. And this one will be about the SharePoint Advanced Management License. Let's start with some introductions. Let me start with myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Vlad Catrinescu. I'm a Microsoft MVP from Montreal, Canada. Really excited to join you today. I've been an MVP for 10 years now, and a lot of you might know me from Pluralsight. I do a lot of content there, and I also do 3 books that nobody reads anymore, because who reads technical books still? Everything changes so fast that it's not really popular anymore, but it's still really cool to have them on the shelf. For those of you on Twitter, or I should call it X now, you can find me at Vlad Catrinescu, and I also do my best to create interesting content at vladtalkstech.com. Today I'm joined by a very good friend, Microsoft MVP and RD, Gokan. How are you doing, Gokan?
I'm doing pretty well, Vlad. Thank you for the nice introduction. So I'll take it over for you for a couple of seconds. I don't have a nice picture as yours, unfortunately, but I try to do my best. I'm actually joining you from Brussels, Belgium. So I should say bonjour, hello, welcome, willkommen, salam, shalom in any language, because Europe is like multilingual and we do speak a lot of languages. So welcome, everyone. It's pretty amazing to see you all here. The Twitter or the X handle I do have is xgokan. So if you follow me or just shoot me an email on my email address, gokan@neoxy.be, I'll be extremely glad to help you out after this webinar. But hey, Vlad, what do we do for today?
Sure. So I did mention it before that this webinar is part of a series. So we wanted to cover Syntex, but we realized there's just so much content to cover that there is no way to do it in a single webinar, or at least there's no way to do it properly, because we don't want to just bore you with slides. We want to show it in action. So we split this into, I think we called it a 2.5 webinar series, right, Gokan? The first one today is all about the SharePoint Advanced Management License. So this is a new license. Of course, we'll go more in depth in a few minutes here. Brand new license that adds a ton of features for SharePoint and OneDrive management. That's what we're going to cover in depth today. Our next webinar, and don't worry if you didn't see it, when you get the recording for this webinar, you'll get a link to register. It's all about enhancing the value of your content. So how do we use Microsoft Syntex to analyze our documents using AI, extract metadata, and do a lot of other magic that Gokan will show us in the next one, which is on September 19th, so in only 5 days from now. And Syntex is such a new service that it keeps evolving. And Gokan, you'll probably laugh, but it's one of those services that Microsoft announced a ton of things for, but the release, actually the products being able to use them, are slowly trickling in. So for the last one, we're going to do an on-demand video about what's coming next, where we share some of the upcoming features and our talks about them. You'll get that one by email, whether you register for webinar 1 or webinar 2. You'll get the link to that one, which will be available on demand. Since those features are not out yet, we couldn't do a live because we couldn't answer many of your questions, but I'm sure in the future, Gokan will do a live one once those features come out.
Now, I'm pretty sure we will do a new series in 2024 with an upgrade with all the new features they will get in, right?
I think we have to, because again, so many upcoming cool things are happening, and I can't wait to get my hands on them. Okay,
fantastic.
Now, a bit of housekeeping. The webinar will be recorded. Hopefully, I did start the recording, right, Gokan? Yes. Okay, good. The webinar is being recorded. You'll get an email by tomorrow morning with a link to the recording. So if you ever need to drop off in the middle, or if you realize this is so awesome and you want to send it to your colleague, you'll be able to have a link where you can send it to anybody you like. And As much as I love hearing Gokan talk and me and Gokan talk to each other, don't let us do a monologue for 60 minutes. The really cool thing about having a live webinar is being able to ask questions. Now for the questions, the chat has been disabled in this meeting. However, there is a Q&A widget at the top. So if you're in Microsoft Teams, you look at the top of your bar, you'll see Q&A in there. So feel free to ask all your questions in there. While I do some of the demos today, Gokan will be monitoring it. And I told him, Gokan, you can interrupt me with any question. I have a demo environment I can break, so we can try everything live. And if there's anything you love, the reactions are also enabled, so feel free to send us some thumbs up, some hearts, and all the other amazing reactions that Teams offers us. Okay, this is it for the housekeeping. Now, what's our plan for today? Well, first part, the introductions are already done, so we're already one thing done, Gokan, we're good like that. Next up, Gokan will give us a nice introduction to Microsoft Syntex. So what is Syntex as a platform? Where does it fit inside the Microsoft 365 ecosystem? Why did Microsoft release a brand new suite of cloud services for that? After that, I'll take over and we'll introduce the SharePoint Advanced Management License. So the big topic for today, we're of course going to do lots of demos. That's the goal for today. Show you every single feature in action. And lastly, I added Q&A in there, but please don't wait until the end. You have a question, ask it while it's fresh before you forget it. And let's make this fun and lively. But now it's time for me to be quiet as Gokan will give us an amazing introduction to Microsoft Syntex.
Well, thank you so much, Vlad. Yes, it's my time. It's my 10, 15 minutes, famous time to explain you in a human-centric way what Microsoft Syntex is. What I've seen in the last couple of years that people are scared when they hear Microsoft Syntex. It's not because Microsoft is doing a bad job. It's simply because they hear new stuff. They hear automatization. They hear content AI, and they pretty don't know what it is. So here is, in a couple of slides, what Microsoft Syntex is today, with a pretty evolution line, which will come in a few months. So how Microsoft defines Syntex is today, you can and will use Syntex for content understanding, processing, and a compliance service that's using intelligent document processing, content artificial intelligence AI to actually bring data from any structured and unstructured data to your SharePoint. You will reduce your risks, discover new knowledge, extend your knowledge, and increase compliance by using Syntex. What do I mean with reducing your security risk? Microsoft Syntex will actually replace your legacy systems with technology, new technology, and new world-class management techniques. In a few other words, SharePoint advanced management capabilities. You will discover new knowledge. Today, we have tons of data, tons of information that's residing within M365 or outside M365, which we don't know what we can do with that, and we have no control on it. With Syntex, you can discover new knowledge, and as the backend is actually SharePoint, well, you can use that data that you discover with Syntex, and you can extend that data by using it through the Graph APIs, by integrating it within Power Platform, or even integrating with the on-premises data gateway and have an interaction in on-premises and building your reports and so on. So Syntex is not only about, I can use content AI, but I can also extend that content AI with any platform I have in-house and add some compliance, such as labels, retention policies, and so on that content. It's actually the centerpiece of all what you can do within the M365 from a content perspective. When we look at Microsoft on how they divide Syntex, well, they use enhance, build, and the manage component, where you will see that each one of those pillars have significant different features that we can use. As Vlad mentioned, many of them are today not available yet for us. So Microsoft is building them, and they're bringing a lot of new functionalities under the Syntex umbrella, but today's focus is going to be on the new world-class management techniques as the SharePoint Online Management. But when we look at the enhanced part, where we will understand data and assemble data, which we will see in a couple of days on the 19th, it's extracting, tagging, and indexing content. It's to use annotations, translations, and summarization documents. So that's the part where we will use Content AI. Then you have the build, where we will discover and reuse the existing data with advanced search, e-signatures, and so on. And finally, the management part with the lifecycle management, with backup and restore that has been announced recently, as well as the SAM capabilities. When we look, well, Syntex is composed about 3 big tools or services within its umbrella. You have the first part, the Viva Topics, which was the first one. Then you have Syntex, which is the Content AI part, and then the SharePoint Advanced Management. When we have a look on Syntex, it's, as I said a couple of seconds ago, all the enhanced, build, and manage sides. And when I go for the topics, it's actually the first tool we have received from Project Cortex. Project Cortex, which was the code name, right, Vlad, from
a while ago, yeah.
a while ago, Project Cortex, and Viva was like the first tool they've ever released under the Cortex umbrella. The magic with Viva Topics is it's capable to link everything together. So if you have a bunch of data within your M365, well, you can use Viva Topics to link them all together with AI in the background. It's not the topic for today. The topic is SharePoint Advanced Management. But for today, it's good to understand that Syntex has 3 main pillars under its umbrella: Syntex for Content AI, Viva Topics for gathering information and putting it together, and the world-class management techniques with SAP. Now, how does that fit into the M365 ecosystem? What we think is that Syntex is going to be capital for the whole ecosystem. Whenever you extract your data, and you'll be straight in the middle of the image, and let me take my laser pointer and show it. This is where you will extract your data. And whenever you extract your data, well, you have 4 different ways to go. You can either go through the Power Platform, and you can use that data as a connector. You can actually go and use that data which has been extracted within your SharePoint and use Power Apps to customize your forms. You can use that data source within the Power Platform and in what Power Automate used as a connector. You can even convert this to a Power Virtual Table and use it in Power Pages, or bring that into a Dataverse. So it is actually the starting point for any application you would like to build within Power Platform. You can also go to the right side, to the SharePoint side. For those who have been using SharePoint for a long time, you can go and use that data within SharePoint Framework Solutions, within the Graph, or even within Visual Studio. If you go to the top side, well, you can use that data within M365 Search and within the Syntex Search, with which we will see in a couple of days. And finally, you can use that data to apply some DLP policies on top of it. You can use retention labels, or use Syntex also for the SAM capabilities. So as you can see, Syntex is straight in the middle, and with the newly discovered data, well, you can do a bunch of stuff. Well, is Microsoft new into that ecosystem? No. Well, Microsoft has been doing this for a long time, and they have the Syntex, which is SharePoint Syntex, but then they also have the AI builder capabilities, which is with the freeform and so on, that comes under the M365 umbrella. So we will focus mainly on the Syntex and AI builder within the coming days within the Syntex webinar. But they also have the Azure Applied Services. I have no idea on how professional developers use that. I'm pretty sure you guys don't have any idea as well. But here is like one slide that shows you the difference between Syntex, AI Builder, and Power Automate, as well as the Azure Form Recognizer. As you can see, they're almost doing the same thing. They have different licensing capabilities, but one is for end user, one is for citizen developer, and one is for pro developer. In my humble 30 15-year career, I haven't done any development stuff. Either Vlad has never done any development stuff, so please don't come with questions.
That's not true. I do have one blog on Visual Studio stuff, so I can say I've done developer stuff. But I think we're both IT pros at heart, Gokan, right? That's where our heart and passion is.
Absolutely. And the blog post of Vlad about Visual Studio is how to install it, right? It's not how to use it. So in any case, that was the introduction about Syntex I had before giving it to Vlad. The only thing you have to remember is Syntex is at the heart of content AI with three main pillars that you can use. And today we'll use the most brand new one, which is SAM. Vlad, it's up to you now, my friend.
Awesome. Let me take it over. Let me take over the screen, Gokan. Let me know once you see it, because if not, I'll start talking and nobody will see it yet.
I can see it, yes.
You can see it? That's awesome.
Yes.
Well, Gokan, thank you so much for that great introduction. Loved it. And I think it's really important before you always go into features to understand where does a service fit inside Microsoft's cloud services, because it's evolving so much right now. We started by only having Azure and Microsoft 365. Now we have Power Platform, Fabric, Syntex, and they're all different suites that connect to each other. So understanding where they fit in that ecosystem is very important. But today, the main focus of our webinar will be the SharePoint Advanced Management License. So this is a new license that Microsoft released in 2023. And yes, I know I'm using the word license. I'll get to it, but it'll be something you have to pay for. And I believe we're almost towards the end of the year. You're probably used by now to Microsoft. Everything they announced is a paid extra. Nothing is included anymore, but it's something that got released this year, and it's part of the Microsoft Syntex content services. The SharePoint Advanced Management License, or SAM, I think we'll just call it SAM. I'm sorry if there's any SAMs on the webinar today. You'll hear your name a lot, but don't worry, it's just the acronym for SharePoint Advanced Management. So it's a suite of features that helps you manage and govern SharePoint and OneDrive, as well as enhance the Microsoft 365 secure collaboration capabilities. Now, the price is $3 per user per month in USD. I know we have a bunch of people from Europe, a bunch of people from Canada on the webinar. So it will be a bit more or a bit less than that, depending on how the currency exchange goes. But Microsoft always prices stuff in USD, so it's $3 US per user per month, and it's an add-on license. So you already need to have a license that has SharePoint. So let's be honest, all Office 365 licenses have SharePoint. All Microsoft 365 licenses have SharePoint. So you already need to have a SharePoint Online license, either standalone or part of a bundle. And then you have that extra $3 per user per month. Before I go forward, remember, licensing always changes. And my favorite word as a consultant, well, my favorite two words are it depends. So always make sure to check with your licensing specialist for the most up-to-date details. And since Gokan is so focused, you can also just ask Gokan on LinkedIn for any licensing question. I'm sure he would love that.
No, we just had one question. I was replying on it. So the question was from Cinda, which said, I maybe didn't hear very well, but this topic's part of Syntex licensing. It was a licensing question. And I gently replied that topics was just the first tool done by Project Cortex. It's a different tool which requires different licensing. That was the reason why I was so serious.
Oh, okay. Oh, I knew it had to do with licensing. I had a feeling in the force, that like there was a licensing somewhere. Thank you so much for answering it, Gokan, and for saying it out loud for everybody that's watching the recording later. Okay, so what do we have in the SharePoint Advanced Management License? We have restricted access control for SharePoint sites, restricted access control for OneDrive, data access governance reports for SharePoint, conditional access policies for SharePoint sites and OneDrive, secure SharePoint document libraries, the block download policy for SharePoint sites and OneDrive, recent admin actions, and there's another one in there that I don't have in this list because it was going to be covered part of the upcoming features because it's still rolling out. And of course, as it always happens, the morning of the presentation, it appears in my tenant. So it's not there, but we'll keep it as a bonus at the end. Let's start with the first one, restricted access control for SharePoint sites. So by default, SharePoint, one of the really powerful things that it has is its advanced permission policy, right? We can have permissions at the site level, we can break permission at the document library level, folder level, item level, and even if we have a group connected site, what we can do as a site owner, I can say, hey, you know what? I can add somebody only to the SharePoint site and not to the Microsoft 365 group, because every Microsoft 365 group includes a SharePoint site. But the goal, I think, at the base of Microsoft 365 groups was to have one set of permissions, have the same people have access to everything, but we could add permissions only to SharePoint if we wanted to. And for standalone sites, of course, a site owner can add both Entra ID groups. Gokan, I don't know about you, but it still feels weird for me to say Entra ID instead of Azure AD, which I've been saying for like 10 years now. But Entra ID is the new name for Azure Active Directory, got rebranded this year. But we can actually restrict how some of the sharing is done by using restricted access control for SharePoint sites. Now, we have two different behaviors depending on if it's a group connected site or a standalone site. So if it's a group connected site, you can force SharePoint to limit the site permissions to the user's part of the Microsoft 365 group. So basically, if I want to give somebody access to the SharePoint site, I need to add them to the full Microsoft 365 group. I cannot have somebody only be in the SharePoint site. This will also make it a lot easier for your access reviews, for example, because you would only need to create your access reviews for the M365 group. You will not have different permissions at the M365 group and at the associated SharePoint site. Now for standalone SharePoint sites. So think of your communication sites. Think of for the IT pros out there, the SDS3 team site, so standalone modern team site. You could have a list of security groups and nobody would be able to share outside of those security groups. And you can have up to 10 of them. Gokan, you have any use cases for us when this could come in useful?
Well, we do a lot when you have, and one of my customers is actually waiting for this, is when you work a lot with vendors, with external people, with people who don't have to read some specific documents, highly regulated environments, we all look for restricting access for SharePoint sites. Today, you could tell me, Gokan, hey, we already have sensitivity labels and so on, and we have retention policies. Why wouldn't you use that one? Well, basically, with SAM, I am the owner of my site, and I don't have to do like huge projects to manage all of those stuff and start with the extremely costful project. I can go and say, hey, I like to restrict that site for XYZ reason because I don't want Vlad Cătărescu from outside of Belgium reading my documents, as an example. So it's pretty phenomenal that now as a SharePoint admin, I can do this. Just one thing worth to say maybe as well is you have to be a SharePoint admin to do this, right, Vlad? So not
to configure it, of course.
Yes, absolutely.
You need to be a SharePoint admin. So not only compliance, you need to be a SharePoint admin to do it. Awesome. Okay, so how do we configure it? So once you have that SharePoint Advanced Management license, and I saw, by the way, a lot of questions about licensing, about the pay-as-you-go. inside the chat. Those are all very valid questions. And Gokan, I think you would agree with me to say that the whole Microsoft Syntex suite right now is discovering its licensing, it's discovering itself, how it's going to charge. And Microsoft had stuff per user per month for both the SharePoint advanced management and the stuff we're going to talk about next Tuesday, which is all about document processing. My understanding, well, first of all, always check with your licensing professional because it's changing right now. A lot of the stuff Microsoft announced for licensing is not there yet at the time of this webinar. We're sharing with you today how it is right now. And I know there is also a question, can we try it out for a dev license? What you can do for the advanced management license, if you're cheap like me, you can just get the free trial. So you can go in your admin center, go in services, you can start a free 30-day trial for the SharePoint Advanced Management license. After you run out, you can extend it for another 30 days. So you can try it out on a tenant for 60 days without paying. Once you turn it on, that trial, you will get the little diamond there on the left that says Advanced Management. So you'll actually see more things appear in your admin center after you activate that trial. Okay, so how do we configure restricted access control? First of all, we need to turn it on at the tenant level. So we want to say, hey, for this tenant, we want to allow restricted access control. And then for each site that you want to activate it on, you will go in the site settings, and then you'll have a new option, restricted site access. Again, if you don't have the license, you will not see what's in the screenshot right now in the slides and what I have in the demo. You need to have that trial or that license to be able to configure it. So you'll see that there, and you'll be able to configure it from the admin center. You can also, of course, configure it with PowerShell. So if you want to enable the feature at the tenant level, set SPO tenant, enable restricted access control true. And then if you want to configure it for a group connected site, set SPO site, give it the identity of the SharePoint site, and then set restricted access control to true. Remember, for group connected sites, the only thing we're telling it is you cannot add people to the SharePoint site only. You can only add people to the group, and that's the only way they can get access to the SharePoint site. And for standalone sites, we need to enable it, and then we also need to use the add restricted access control groups to tell it which Enter ID groups can have access to the site. Okay, Gokan, I think that's enough slides. Let's go to the demo and break some things. So first of all, you can still see my screen, right, Gokan?
I still can see your screen, yes, man.
Awesome, thank you so much. Okay, so what I'll do here, I'll go to Advanced Management on the left, which you see has the little diamond here right next to it because that's how much it will cost you, price of a little diamond. I'm joking for any Microsoft people watching. But in this page, you basically have some shortcuts to all the places where you can go and configure things. So it's not necessarily here that you configure them. Here's the shortcuts on where you configure them. So if I go to access control here, you see I have site access restriction, has the little pro right next to it. I'll click on it, and here I only have a yes or a no. Do you want to allow access restriction or not? I will click on close here. You can see it's turned on. And then we will go to our sites. And then I have a site here called Restricted Access Control Demo. So I'll click on it to go to the settings. And this, if I remember correctly, this you can see the admin is group owners. So I already know this is a group connected site. I will go to the settings over here. And at the bottom, I have restricted site access with the pro icon next to it. If I click on edit, I can have restricted access to this site. So because it's a group connected site, is only a yes or a no. Now, let me clear this and let me just filter. I created another site. I don't know about you, Gokan, but I always forget how I name my sites.
Yes.
There we go. I knew I was creative after my coffee this morning. Another beautiful communication site. That's how you should. All your sites are beautiful. If we go to this site, you can see this is a communication site, right? So it's not group connected. If I go to settings here, I have restricted access control, but I don't have the same behavior because for standalone SharePoint sites, we're not restricting it to the connected group. There's no connected group. So we have to tell it, here are the groups from which you can invite people. You cannot invite anybody from outside this group. So how does it look like? I'll go here to my SharePoint site. So this is the first one. Let me zoom in a tiny bit just to make sure you all see it. I'll give it a refresh for the demo gogs just in case. Gokan, you did sacrifice that old virtual machine I told you about for the demo gogs, right?
I need all of them, yes.
Okay, thank you. You always have to sacrifice something for the demo gogs before a demo. But what I can do, and this behavior doesn't really change. So remember, this is a group connected site. You see, I have private group here. I'll go into, not site contents, I'll go into, I got too excited. I clicked on the first thing with site. Site permissions here, and then I can add members. You can see here I can add members to the group or share the site only. So this option still remains here. I can add Vanessa as an owner if I want to. Even if Vanessa is not part of the group, I won't send an email. And now under site owners, I see Vanessa. However, Vanessa is not actually part of the group. I just tried to add Vanessa to the SharePoint site. So now, what happens if I go in here with Vanessa? If the policy took effect, I have an access denied. So even if I just added Vanessa to the SharePoint site, I have an access denied, and the error is your organization's policies prevent you from seeing the content on this site. So you see, it's not the same access denied error you usually get where you need to request access and it says you don't have permissions to this site. You get a, hey, you have, well, it doesn't say you have permissions, but what blocks you is that you have a policy, an organization policy that blocks you from accessing this site. And the issue type here is user has encountered a policy issue. Now, of course, as an admin, I would love if we would get more information in there, like, hey, you have been blocked because of restricted access control, because if a user just gives me this, I might not know where to go. So I would personally love if, as an admin, if a user sends me this screenshot, something would tell me this has to do with restricted access control. I would personally love that. But just so you know, luckily, it's not that same message as just a missing permissions. It really talks about organization policies.
Vlad.
Yes.
Three things. First, I'd like to add one thing to the demo, Vlad. If you already have an existing site with a lot of people that you have shared and you decide to restrict the access, please don't forget that they will all lose their access if they are not part of that group. So we made a test on an existing production site, and I can tell you everyone was upset. So please
use... Well, that's why you don't test in production, Gokan. That's why you don't test in production.
Yeah, but you know, I had no beautiful site as you did. Then I have two questions, Vlad, for you within the chat. I tried to respond, but I will let you also reply to that one. So Justin asks, from the SAM side of the things, is the licensing needed for both the admin center functionality as well as the PowerShell commandlets, or will the PowerShell commandlets works without the licensing? I said I highly doubt it will work, but I'll let the expert talk.
No, it will not work without the licensing. And anyway, let me give you a word of warning. There's a few things that the way Microsoft designed them work when they shouldn't. So you're going to ask me, Vlad, and I think there was a question about it. Vlad, will this work if I only license one admin? Will the feature work? You know what? It might work. I think it probably actually works if you only license one person, the admin. However, once you get audited, and Microsoft will do those audits, they have billions of petabytes of telemetry. They know who's using what. Once you get audited, Microsoft will come knocking with a really pretty invoice of, hey, it looks like you've been using this feature for the past 3 years. Here's the licensing agreement that you knew we had. Here's how much you have to pay, because they're going to charge you since you started using it. There's a few things that work like that. For example, all of the Azure AD P1 stuff for group naming conventions, for expiration policies, a lot of them will work if you only have one licensed user, because you'll be able to configure them. But what Microsoft licensing says in the back, every user that benefits from this feature should be licensed. I think that's the wording that is used. So this is why I highly recommend that you talk to a licensing specialist, especially because licensing changes so often, and I never want to be called in a lawsuit of, but Vlad told me that it's only this amount and you can only license one person, so always talk with your licensing specialist. And here's, by the way, I went to the beautiful communication site here in the URL, and I have the same error because Vanessa is not part of that security group. And just for the fun of it, what I'll do after, let me go to groups here. It will take a bit of time, but while we talk about other things, I think it was HR bot testers, right? That if I go into admin center, settings, HR bot testers, let me go here. I'll add Vanessa to the group. I know it won't work right away. It will take somewhere for a few minutes, but we still have a bit of time in this webinar. So we'll try it by the end of it. Let me search for Vanessa here, select, and it'll take a few seconds. Vanessa will be added, and in a few minutes, we'll try to go back to the beautiful communication site and check it out.
Then I have the second question for you, Vlad. And then I'll just let you, because I said 3 points, right? So I
forgot about that.
No worries. And then the second one is from Voskulian GA, which says, site access restriction, will this disable the option to share documents for members of M365 group, or isn't disabled? What will be the behavior? Like if you share with someone which is not part of the group, will that get the same policy error? That's the question, basically.
The best way to show it, Gokan, is to just go in and show it in action, right? So I had my RAG demo site here. Let me go to documents, and I'll take this one single document only, right? I'll share an item. Then who do I want to share it with? Vanessa here only. So I'm only sharing with Vanessa. Let's do can view, and I'll just copy the link to the clipboard because I don't want to send the email and everything. Now I'll open up a new tab, and you always have to close your eyes before you try it. And there you go. So even if you try to share only one document, you still get the same error. So you're really limiting all permissions to SharePoint to the membership of the connected Microsoft 365 group. Was there another one, Gokan?
No, that's it.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next one. The next one is actually a bit similar. It's the OneDrive restricted access control. The OneDrive restricted access control allows you to configure that only users in specified security groups can access OneDrive. So everybody that's not in the security group will lose access to all OneDrive content. So Gokan, I'll give you a tip. Don't try it in production. That applies to you and everybody. And that includes their own OneDrive and any OneDrive content shared with them, even if it's shared by somebody that's inside of the security group. And you can add up to 10 security groups in there. Now, By the way, I had a screenshot in there. What happens if you try to configure it and you don't have the license? You'll have something like this. Your organization no longer has a Syntex Advanced Management license, so you can only uncheck this checkbox. So if you don't have a license, you will not be able to configure it, whether from PowerShell or the admin center. Now, to configure it, let me go back here to the admin center. I go to access control, and then I have restrict OneDrive access. Here, once the demagogues show it to me, I have the checkbox, restrict OneDrive access to only users in the specified security groups, and I created a demo group called everyone but Vanessa. So this includes everybody except Vanessa. Now, what happens if I go to as Vanessa? I'll go to portal.office.com. I will go to OneDrive, and then I'll close my eyes. And here for this one, you will notice that, so the policy worked, right? Vanessa doesn't have access to the OneDrive. However, I'm not as big of a fan of the error. I wish it was similar to the other one. I wish it said something about, hey, restricted access control is blocking you, because if I'm a new admin or I'm a consultant and the user sends me a screenshot of this, I'll go searching in 15 other places before I look at restricted access control. So I just wish the error message is different, but it works. Now, if I go in as Vlad, because remember, they lose access to all OneDrive content. So I'll go to my files, I'll zoom in a tiny bit here. Maybe I'll zoom in a tiny bit. There we go. I'll get this beautiful PDF document, and what I'll try to do is I'll share it with Vanessa. Let's go here, Vanessa. I will copy the link. Here for OneDrive, I actually get an error. Your organization does not allow you to share with the selected users. So OneDrive implemented it directly in the share dialog, unlike the SharePoint restricted access control. So to be honest, I love the way it's implemented for clients for OneDrive, and I like the way the error shows for the SharePoint one. Now we just need to have the same behavior everywhere, but I really like the way they implemented it. I think there was also a question, what happens if I go here and I cannot do anyone in this one? Can I do anyone in this site? If not, we'll configure it to try it. Let me go into settings, okay. Let's go to active sites. The question, by the way, for everybody else was, what happens if you do an anonymous link? Can I do an anonymous link, Gokan? Let me go to settings here. I will set it to anyone and then click on save. Changes have been saved. I'll give it a refresh for good luck for the demagogues. You always have to give it a refresh for the demagogues. Let's go here. We'll do an anyone link, can view, click on apply. Let's copy the link and let's go to Vanessa. Well, of course, in this case, it actually was smart enough to say, hey, you know what? Vanessa's logged in. However, if I go in and let's go as a guest, this will probably work. It blocked anonymous as well, Gokan. It's that smart. So I always love to show it rather than just say it, just so you can see the experience. It will really block to only members of the Microsoft 365 group.
So yes, so can we also assume and say, and that's a question of Matthew, I replied to it, but just for your confirmation, if we do this, can we also say that the already existing unique permissions will all disabled? Like if I shared a bunch of data outside the site, I decide to restrict my site, so all those links are now dead, right?
So it will not change your actual permissions in SharePoint, but it will block people that, let's say I had a document here that I only shared with Gokan, right?
Yes.
The permission on the document will still show Gokan. So if I go
It
here,
will remain,
if I
yes.
go to details and I see the permission, you see Vanessa is here. So the permission will remain there. But when Gokan tries to access it, it will not work. So it will not change any of the permissions. This is applied a bit like conditional access in a way. Right before you hit the site, the policy will apply when you try to get authorized for that specific document. Okay, Gokan, I see we're talking a lot as always. So let me talk about some of the other policies, just so we make sure we have time to cover them all. Okay, my next one, and I think, Gokan, do we still do slides or do we just do demos?
We have like 40 minutes left, so you can go with the demo.
I can go with the demo, right?
Yes.
Our next feature is the data access governance. We like demos most of the time, but it's important to still have slides at the beginning to cover the foundations. But then we promised you lots of demos, and that's what you're going to get. So data access governance gives me access to two types of reports. So first one is sharing links. Allows me to identify potential oversharing by monitoring sites where users created new sharing links in SharePoint. I can go on view reports, and I have 3 reports over here. Anyone links, people in your organization links, and specific people links shared externally. Those reports are not live. You need to select it and then click on run all. And it might take a few hours for them to run. So I'm not going to run them live, but I'll look at an example here of anyone links. I can see that my site over here getting started. Well, I know it's getting started with Microsoft Power Automate. I have the link here. I know that there are 3 links of type anyone created in the past 30 days from when the report was run. I can see who the primary admin is. I can see the site sensitivity if you have sensitivity labels configured, unmanaged devices, and external sharing settings. And you can always download the detailed report if ever you want to send it to somebody that doesn't have access to the admin center. Maybe you're a compliance admin, for example, if you want to, or you want to put it in a SQL database somewhere for reporting, for historically looking at it. So you do have those 3 reports that you can run to see how many sites have links of type anyone, people in your organization, and specific people. Now my other type of report, Gokan, give me 1 second. Yes. We'll cover both of them and then we'll get to the question. The other type is the sensitivity labels applied to files. So you can view up to 10,000 SharePoint sites that have the most Office files with specific sensitivity labels applied. So if you use sensitivity labels, you're able to see what are the files that have it. This way you're able to, in a way, say, hey, do I have a document in my Vlad and Gokan top secret initiatives that is tagged as public? Why is it tagged as public? Maybe you have an error in the way you deployed your sensitivity labels that you need to fix. You might discover things like that. But those are the reports included with the data access governance functionality. Gokan, what are the questions? Sorry, I just wanted to show both of them, and then we'll get to the questions.
There were no questions. I actually wanted just to say that the first report is going to show the top 100 sites. So if you are a company with zillions of sites, it will only show the top 100 sites in the report. So that's the only thing I wanted to mention.
Well, actually, Gokan, so the page only shows the top 100, but the download
10,000
shows 10,000.
10,000.
So that's a really good point. I forgot about it. Thank you so much, Gokan.
No worries.
Okay, next up. Well, we're talking about security. So let me go here. Our next feature is called secure document libraries. Now, Gokan, aren't all document libraries secure? I thought SharePoint was secure. But what secure document libraries allows me to do, allows me to go to the library settings here and allows me to set a default sensitivity label for every document that gets created or edited in this library. So really, sensitivity labels sometimes are a bit like metadata. You know, Gokan, for how many times we've trained users to actually tag their documents in SharePoint? Forever. I feel like tag your documents, add all the metadata, things like that. Now with sensitivity labels, if you have an E5 license, you have some automation you can do in the back for it, but you don't necessarily have that automation everywhere. And what happens if the automation fails? Well, I can say that in this document library, if the user doesn't set any sensitivity label manually, it will be internal project confidential. So if I go create a new PowerPoint presentation here, what will I add in here? I will, of course, add, once it loads, Gokan is the best. There we go. Awesome. Now, of course, I can go here. You see, by default, I didn't do anything. It's internal project confidential. And if I go back, I'll just close it. I'll go back here. Again, refresh for the demagogues. It might take a few seconds, but there you go. I didn't do anything as a user. It's internal project confidential. Of course, a user can change it after. The goal is not to replace what a user will do. The goal is what happens if a user doesn't do it. And something else that is really cool is that if the user has a default label applied, if this label that you have in the document library is higher priority, it can apply that label. Okay, we're doing good on time, right, Gokan?
Yep, fantastic. Can I just add one thing with that, Vlad, if that's okay for you? So that option for people who are using E5 licenses it's already included. So this feature that you see within that document library where you can add your sensitivity label is part of SAM, but as well as for E5 users. So if you don't have SAM licenses, but you have E5, you should also be able to use that functionality, just as info.
And that's why I let Gokan answer all the licensing questions. Okay, our next feature is called the block download policy. So what is the block download policy? The block download policy allows you to configure certain sites to not allow people to download, print, or sync files. It limits access to only using the online version of Microsoft 365 apps, and you can configure it as a SharePoint option only without using conditional access, because you can implement some things like that with conditional access as well, but this, you can have it only as a SharePoint admin. This can only be configured at the site level, but not at the tenant level, and it's only with PowerShell. So the easy way to configure it is set SPO site, give it the site URL, block download policy true. You can actually have some exceptions for this one. So you can say, hey, you know what? The site owners are excluded from the policy. So I can say, you know what? The site owners can download stuff. Or I can add a group of people that are able to still download. So I do have those options, but if you only run the first one, nobody will be able to download files. Once you enable it, you'll have a warning at the top. Your organization's security policy doesn't allow you to download, print, or sync from this site. So now if I go to, let me go to site contents here. I should probably have a document in here. Let's go to documents. If I select it, you see, I don't have the download. If I click open, I can only open in the browser. I cannot open in PowerPoint locally. If I open the PowerPoint document here, and by the way, just to a bit show you how it is on other ones, I can open in the app if I want to. I can download it if I want to, whereas in this one, I don't have the option to download. And once PowerPoint opens, if I go to file here, I do not have the print option that I usually have. So we're really forcing people to view the documents online only. They're not able to download, sync, or print them. So if you have a site that you want to make sure people only see things online, nobody can extract data, this is a way you can implement it only as a SharePoint admin, because don't get me wrong, we had ways to do this before with all the compliance tools we have, with sensitivity labels, with conditional access, even with I was going to say Cloud App Security, but that changed name as well. But we had so many tools in the compliance stack that allowed us to implement parts of this. But now we have it as a SharePoint admin only. I can configure that without having to pay a beer or a lunch to my compliance admin. So I love it. Gokan, any use cases for this one?
Yes, we wait for this functionality because we want to share documentation with vendors. We at the company AG Insurance, to give a name, we have a lot of partners. And when we as a financial institution write stuff, we don't want people to download it. We don't want people to print it out because they are literally changing every week. So by using that kind of sites, you just make sure that people can read, understand your data, but they will not be able to change any data on your site. That's one of those use cases, just using all the documentation in a site with your vendors, with your partners, so they are not able to read. Well, they're able to read, but not change or download. So, you get into that conflict like, hey, I've downloaded your file 6 months ago and the interest rate was 3%. Now your website says 10%. What do we do? No, it's always on my website. It's always up to date. You just read them. So that's one of those use cases.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gokan. Okay, now let's go to a feature. This one is a feature for admins in the admin center. We have a functionality here called Your Recent Actions. So I can see, sometimes we have to do something in production like Gokan did and admitted he broke things. You didn't have your morning coffee and you did something, all of a sudden things are broken and you forgot what you did. Well, what you have is your recent actions. What are the most recent things you did inside the admin center? Did you delete a site, create a site? Oh, you see, something stopped working because I changed sharing settings on a specific site. This is when I changed it to anyone. So you can really see everything that you did. I can also go to, not this one, I can go to the change history page where I can see all the changes done in my tenant in the last 180 days. Oops. And this can also include other admins. So if Gokan breaks something and then goes on vacation for 6 weeks to enjoy the sun in Turkey, and I don't know what happened, I can go in there and then I can see, what did Gokan break? What do I have to undo to make my environment work again? Gokan, do you relate to this one?
I do relate a lot, so I'm not going to comment on it. I just want to say one thing. That option from a licensing perspective is also available, if not wrong, without the SUM license. However, the only thing is, if you do stuff within the admin center without the SUM license, you will see a report, but once you click on close the browser, the cache will be emptied, and when you open it again, you won't be able to see it. Just wanted to say that one on top of that.
Thank you so much, Gokan, for that clarification. Okay, we got 1 minute left. So this is the bonus one that I wanted to show you. This actually hit my tenant this morning. It's still something that is rolling out. I can now have an activity report for my site. So just to kind of do quick slides before I show you the report, I can create a report of inactive sites. I can decide to send emails to owners monthly so they can review inactive sites. And as an admin, I can also generate reports of sites with unresponsive owners. So this will really look, did anybody view files, edit files, shared files? Did anybody for that group connected site? Were they active in Teams? Did we receive any emails in that Exchange mailbox? And what will happen? You see, I created a policy here. I'll download the report, and right now it's in simulation mode, so I'm not spamming anyone. But I can see, for example, okay, what is the site name? And again, I'll zoom in a bit. I can see the template. So team site, does it have Teams enabled or not? When is the last activity and when was it created? You see, I have some sites here that have actually not been touched since 2020. Like nobody viewed a file in them. Those are sites that I can probably get rid of. And this is functionality that was only available in third-party tools before. There was no way to do this. I mean, there was always a way with PowerShell and audit log and all of that, but there was no way to really do it out of the box. You needed a third-party tool to do it. Now, we have some of this functionality directly in the SharePoint Online Admin Center, which is pretty awesome. Gokan, did you get a chance to use this one yet?
No, not yet, but I can tell you this is going to be a game changer. As you mentioned, not having third-party tools and having this within the M365 ecosystem and getting that simple report that says me, hey, this is the sites that are not being used, and alerting the admins, my goodness, that's something we've been waiting for like since SharePoint 2001. So good game, Microsoft, good game.
Okay, Gokan, I have one more I skipped, and this one we won't do a demo just because in the interest of time. One last feature we're going to talk about today, conditional access policy for SharePoint sites and OneDrive. This was in preview, and before, when it was in preview, we could do it without the SAM license, but now it does require the SAM license. It allows you to apply an authentication context, part of conditional access, only to a site rather than to SharePoint as an application. So I can really have conditional access policies apply to specific sites only. You need to, of course, you need to configure your conditional access policy. It's your Entra ID admin that usually does this, and then you apply it to your SharePoint site using PowerShell, using SetSPO site, and the conditional access policy parameter. Awesome. Gokan, I think this is it for today. We're going to remain available for some questions, but I wanted to finish only 2 minutes late, just for everybody that has a meeting coming up. Thank you so much for everybody that attended. By tomorrow morning, you'll get a link to the recording. You'll get access to the slides and all of that. It will all be directly in your emails again by tomorrow morning, or at least tomorrow morning Montreal time, not Brussels time, just in case, setting expectations. But thank you so much for really taking an hour out of your day to come and listen to me and Gokan talk about a subject we're really passionate about. And I really hope we're going to see you at our second webinar in the series happening on September 19th. If you haven't signed up for it yet, you'll get a link with the recording. You'll get a link where you can sign up for it. And in that one, you'll hear me talk less. Gokan will be doing all the demos for that one. So it's Gokan's turn to showcase the awesome Syntex. Awesome, Gokan. Anything to add, or do we go in Q&A?
I would say merci beaucoup, as in French, or thank you so much for listening to us. And I've been watching the questions. We don't have any question. We only have like a nice feedback from Justin, which says, thank you, gentlemen. Always a wealth of knowledge. I'm sure I speak for all when I say we're grateful for your time and expertise to make us better at what we do. So that's a nice feedback. Thank you so much, Justin.
Awesome. Well, Gokan, I don't see any more questions coming in. For everybody that's watching the recording, or if you have any follow-up questions, please write them. The video will be on YouTube. There is a comment section. So if ever you have an idea of a question later, or if maybe you're watching the recording and you have a question later, please just write it in the comments of the YouTube video. Me and Gokan will answer those as well. And of course, if you just found us on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the channel to get the latest Microsoft 365 and Power Platform news. So thank you everyone for watching, and hope to see you at the next one. Bye-bye.
Peace.